Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Before we can even get into letters, we have to learn about Harry and where he started. So page 1, The Boy Who Lived. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. Mr. Dursley was director of a firm called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, although he did have a very large mustache. Mrs. Dursley was thin and blonde and had nearly twice the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful as she spent so much of her time craning over garden fences, spying on the neighbors. The Dursleys had a small son called Dudley, and in their opinion there was no finer boy anywhere. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but they also had a secret, and their greatest fear was that someone would discover it. They didn't think they could bear if anyone found out about the Potters. Mrs. Potter was Mrs. Dursley's sister, but they hadn't met for several years. In fact, Mrs. Dursley pretended she didn't have a sister because her sister and her good-for-nothing husband were as un-Dursleyish as it was possible to be. The Dursleys stuttered to think what the neighbors would say if the Potters arrived in the street. The Dursleys knew that the Potters had a small son too, but they had never seen him. The boy was another reason for keeping the Potters away. They didn't want Dudley mixing with a child like that. So, long story short, Harry's dropped off on these people's doorstep, and then the letters. It's his birthday. He turns 11 years old, and he gets his first letter ever, and as he's about to open it, Mr. Dursley snatches it away. But these letters keep coming. You guys have seen the movie. They come through the doors, they come through lots of avenues, the milkman, the chimney, etc., etc., etc. And Mr. Dursley is determined to keep them away from Harry. So he takes him to a hut, and this is where we're going to pick up. I want you guys to think, what could these letters, what could that symbolize in our lives? Someone's trying to tell us something good. It's good news. Letters represent good news. And Mr. Dursley doesn't want Harry to get to the good news, so he tries to stop it up as is humanly possible. Goes to the middle of nowhere, and this is where we get to meet Hagrid. Dun-dun-dun. Call me Hagrid, he says. Everyone does. And like I told ya, I'm keeper of the keys at Hogwarts. I'm keeper of the keys at Hogwarts. That's kind of a cool line. And you know all about Hogwarts, of course. No, said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. Sorry, said Harry quickly. Sorry, barked Hagrid, turning to stare at the Dursleys who shrank back into the shadows. It's them who should be sorry. I knew you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought you wouldn't even know about Hogwarts, for crying out loud. What is Hogwarts? Quish, just a thought. Okay. Did you never wonder where your parents learned it all? All what? Said Harry. All what? Said Hagrid. Now wait just 1 second. He had leapt to his feet. His anger seemed to fill the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against the wall. Do you mean to tell me, he growled at the Dursleys, that this boy knows nothing about anything? Now Harry thought this was going a bit too far. He'd been to school, after all, and his marks weren't bad. I know some things, he said. I can, you know, do math and stuff. But Hagrid simply waved his hand and said, About our world, Harry. I mean your world, my world, your parents' world. What world? Hagrid looked as if he was about to explode. Dursley, he boomed. Uncle Vernon, who had gone very pale, whispered something that sounded like Mimblewimble. Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. "But you must know about your mum and dad," he said. "I mean, they're famous. They're special." "What? My mom and dad? They weren't famous, were they?" "You don't know. You don't know." Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. "You don't know what you are?" he said finally. Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. "Stop," he commanded. "Stop right there, sir. I forbid you to tell a boy anything." A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quailed under the furious look Hagrid now gave him. When Hagrid spoke, his every syllable trembled with rage. "You never told him? Never told him what was in the letter Dumbledore left for him?" "I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley. And you kept it from him for all these years." Guys, what can that symbolize? "Kept what from me?" said Hagrid eagerly. "Stop, I forbid you," said Uncle Vernon. Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror. "I'll go boil your heads, both of you," said Hagrid. "Harry, you're a wizard." There was silence inside of the hut. "I'm a what?" said Harry. "A wizard, of course," said Hagrid, sitting back on the sofa, which groaned and sank even lower. "And a thumpin' good un, I'd say, once you've been trained up a bit. With a mum and dad like yours, what else would you be? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter." Let's read the letter. Pretend to open this. Psh, there's a letter inside. Okay. Harry stretched out his hand to take the yellowish envelope and open it up and read, "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." And for the sake of this video, we're not going to view this as witchcraft or wizardry. I want you to think of what else it could be. From the headmaster, Albus Dumbledore. "Dear Mr. Order of Merlin," Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, the Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Sorcerer, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confederate of Wizards. Basically, is from the boss. Who is this boss? Okay. "Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you," and then we could even say, plug your name in. "Dear Mr. or Mrs. Boop. We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress." Okay. And, questions exploded inside of Harry's head like little fireworks, and he couldn't decide what to ask first. After a few minutes, he stammered, "What does it mean, they await my owl?" Okay, we're going to stop there. So, kind of cool. I was always excited for a letter. But then I realized there is something kind of like that out there. And, instead of "Harry, you're a wizard," let's look at Harry's world. Maybe we could plug in, "You're a child of God." And of course, Hagrid was mad when he saw a boy with a good heart and with the stuff that could make a god, could be like his father. He was mad that he didn't know who his father was, the sacrifices that his parents made for him, and that he hadn't even heard of anything regarding that world, God's world. Of course he was mad. We hear there's a phrase, share the good news. They share it upon the housetops. The Hogwarts letter, it's good news. When you open it up, it's the invitation to join a school to learn how to become like his father. And I love how Hagrid said, "You'll make a good wizard." We could say, "You'll make a good god someday," with a bit of training from the right people. Yeah. And we kind of end with this here. So in another video we talked about the fourth dimension, how there can be dimensions that exist within each other. So one way to think of that is just looking at lines. If we take a dot, how many dots exist in this piece of paper? Probably thousands and thousands and thousands of dots. Now if we draw a dot, if we do a lot of little dots all together, they'll make a line. And then, so a line is a second dimension. So a dot is like one dimension, a line is second dimension because it holds lots of little dots. Then how many lines can exist in this piece of paper? Thousands too, right? So that's like a third dimension. So we have a dot existing in a line, and then lines also existing in a page. Then if we put a lot of pages together, we can make a 3D object, like a book. And that's a third dimension. So we have a dimension within another dimension within another dimension, right? So this idea of a world within a world really isn't that weird to think about. It's just the state in which things can exist. So in Harry Potter, we have Muggles, which for the sake of this video, let's think of them as people that are happy with the dimension that they live in, that are happy to see a rock is only a rock. I don't want to like bash on that because Muggles are good people, right? Then we have the Dursleys they're Dursleys. They're even less Muggle-like. They like things very much just their one way. That's all they want to see, and as long as you're Dursley-ish and you see things the way they see, that's the kind of world they want to exist in. So that's their little house right there, the Dursley house. But then what's amazing is within this world there's wizards, or we could think of them as the next state of being. Again, we're not talking about witchcraft or wizardry, but let's think about this as believing that there's more. And the wizards exist within the Muggle world, but the Muggles just don't see their world because the Muggles don't believe. They can't see it. We have people like Hermione Granger. I'm sure when she got that letter, and some of the other kids that were similar to her, she grew up in a Muggle household. She didn't grow up with parents that believed or had learned to develop those gifts, but she believed, and she made a really good student, and she was able to use her intelligence wisely. And so it doesn't matter where we come from, but I love how Hagrid said that, of course he would be mad that if a child had the desire to become like God, but had never been told about it, had never learned about his Heavenly Father, and what he could be and where he came from and the sacrifices that have been made for him. And especially if people like the Dursleys were keeping the good news out when people did try to reach out, when they did try to help give him extra knowledge and understanding, they kept trying to keep it away from him. Of course you would be angry. Because it's Harry's choice to decide if he wants to go to Hogwarts or not. That's totally fine. But he's got to have the ability to make that choice, so he has to have the letter. He needs to have the good news presented to him so he can make that choice. And we're going to end on that.